In our presentation last night, what did we talk about? Salvation, or preparing us for space travel. Yes, friends, try to imagine that with me. God is literally taking millions of people on a gigantic journey through space. Maybe somebody could just turn off that light. Thank you. From the Earth, we can only see tiny little twinkling stars. But as we get closer and we get into deep space, the scenery will change. There are breathtaking colors and formations of all different heavenly bodies out there. Through the Hubble telescope we can see some, and we are amazed at the array of color that God has, but also the different shapes, the different sizes. And if we interest ourselves in astronomy, we would be amazed at the power of God. Just to give you a little glimpse, the Earth is 1/1,000,000 of the size of the Sun. God made the Earth in 6 days. He created the Earth in 6 days. He created the Sun 1,000,000 times bigger on day 4, together with all the stars and the moon. What a powerful God we serve. It will seem to us as we travel through space that space continues on and on until we reach God's heavenly kingdom. Finally, we will arrive at the gates of the New Jerusalem. Its walls are made of transparent gold. Inside, there are mansions for all the redeemed of the earth. We could say these are refugees from planet Earth. On Earth they were outlawed. They were persecuted as undesirables. But God was pleased to take them to a new country. They are remnants of a civilization that was born in sin, but they washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. While on earth, they decided to live a new life in harmony with the principles of the Bible. In our presentation tonight, we are considering when this will happen. That is why our title for tonight is, How Soon, Lord? Christians have been asking this question ever since the disciples asked that question on the Mount of Olives. The disciples ask about future events, starting with Jerusalem and going right down to the ends of the age. We can see the dialogue between the disciples and Jesus in Matthew 24. There we are told, the disciples said, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Friends, in the ongoing verses of Matthew 24, Jesus talks of the signs of the times. The signs tell us the times we are living in. Now the disciples thought they were asking Jesus one question. When will you come and the end of the age and the destruction of Jerusalem? But as we know today, with hindsight, they asked 3 questions. And Jesus, in his reply, blended them into each other. So he did not say, this refers to the destruction of Jerusalem, and then the rest for the end of the age. But we know today what refers to which part. in the signs that we read about in Matthew 24 tell us the times we are living in. And friends, we have never lived in a time that was as important as our time today. Let us see some of the signs that Jesus is mentioning. He says in chapter 24, verses 6 and 7, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places." Ever since the First and Second World War, we have seen as never before nation rising against nation. In Vietnam, in Afghanistan, in Kosovo, and Iraq, these are all world wars. I know the politicians don't call them that. But when you think about it, whether we call it the coalition of the willing, when there are many nations fighting against one, that is a world war. The term we get from the First and Second World War, where there were 4 or more nations fighting against Germany. So on the same, using the same standard, we have seen many more world wars. But not only that, besides the well-publicized wars, there are 30 to 40 other wars being fought at any one time. We don't hear about them. They might be isolated little conflicts within one country or within 2 or 3 countries. But friends, our world is at war as never before. Think of the slaughter of innocent men, women, and children that is taking place. The ever-increasing number of wounded and maimed. Has the world always been at war? Perhaps yes, but never on this scale. Jesus mentions famines. Famines as a sign that we are coming close to the end. Over the last century, we have heard of many famines in various places. I remember from my childhood days such names as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Africa with its many poor nations, and some countries in South America. World food production has increased. Our technology for sowing and harvesting has been improved, but today we have an ongoing famine. Think about it. Of the world population, 60% are malnourished and 20% are starving. Friends, that means that if you can take 3 meals a day, you belong to the cream of the world population. You are in this small segment where people have plenty of food, they have money to buy it, they can fill their stomachs. When you think of 60 to 80% that don't have that privilege, that makes us very privileged people indeed. And what I have noticed in our travels makes me very sad, because we can go into the restaurant and we can, pardon the expression, we can stuff the food in our mouth without ever giving thanks to God. And yet we have been to poor countries and they pour out their thanks to God for the one meal they have. And I reason in my mind, shouldn't the people that have the best blessings, shouldn't they be the most thankful people? At the same time, while so many people are malnourished and starving, there are vast amounts of money being spent on space exploration and armament. Over 156,000 people starve to death every day. That is around 57 million people every year. That would probably almost wipe out the English population in 1 year. Australia would be wiped out 2.5 times in 1 year. We have about 23 million people. You know, that makes us realize we are very blessed indeed. And then there is another problem, a problem where we can only say, shame on us. In the Western world, we die from having too much food, while in the Third world, people die from starvation. Jesus said, famines, pestilences, that is referring to diseases, and earthquakes are the beginning of sorrows. It will continue to worsen right until Jesus returns. In his description about conditions of the last days, Jesus mentions pestilences. We don't use that word today, but we are referring to diseases. Let's take a look at the medical field. There was a time when people died of natural causes. Do you remember that time? You have to be reasonably old to remember someone that died of natural causes. Natural causes is old age. This marvelous piece of creation that we call the human body has been going on and on until its days were full. Then the heart stopped beating, the lungs stopped breathing, we died of natural causes. But how is it today? How many people that you have known have died of natural causes? I would guess very few. How can this be? Today, people die of heart disease, of cancer, stroke, lung disease, and diabetes. Then there is a whole list of new plagues that people also die from today. They die of SARS, mad cow disease, hantavirus, bird flu, and Ebola virus. The invention of the last century in the form of antibiotics is fast losing its effectiveness as superbugs are being discovered against which there is no known cure. All the doctor can say is, go home, you're going to die. Friends, how have we got into this situation? Have a look at how the human race has deteriorated since creation. These are people that lived before the flood. And we are down at the end. Friends, I know when you look in the mirror, you don't think of yourself like a little cripple. But we are a little crippled race. Sin has deteriorated us, where today we are not even 1/3 of the size God made Adam and Eve. And you know, if you go to Asia, I know I'm familiar with Asia, sometimes it shocks me. I see people that only come to my waist, and they are fully grown adults. What will Adam and Eve think when they confront the human race on the day of resurrection? Friends, it is sad. We can't do anything about it. But when our politicians and scientists tell us we are on the way up, don't believe it. We are on the way down. Maybe we can't go much lower. That's a true assessment of where we are today. We are not improving. We are all slowly dying. But besides famine and pestilence, Jesus mentions earthquakes. You don't have earthquakes in England, do you? There was a time when we arrived in Australia where they would say, Australia doesn't have any earthquakes. And yet within months, and it wasn't because we arrived, but within months, we had a major earthquake. The blessing was, it was in an area that was poorly populated, so there was no loss of life. But you can travel through the area today and you will see signs, earthquake walled, turn this way. Yeah, it's a place for tourists to go to. Oh, this where Australia had an earthquake. Of course, we have many earthquakes today in Australia. Earthquakes are no strangers to us. We have heard about them on the news. We have witnessed them on TV or even experienced them personally. Some years back, when I was on a fly and build in Vanuatu, that is, I think it used to be called the New Hebrides, down in the South Pacific, we experienced a major earthquake, and it was only a few kilometers away from where we are. I can tell you, somebody who was more experienced about earthquakes than we were said, "Earthquake, get out!" And we dashed out either the back door or the front door. And it was about 100 meters down to the ocean. And I saw something that I had never seen before. The earth, the green grass, was rolling like a wave towards us. And those that had rushed out through the front door, we had an old four-wheel drive there, and they said, "We saw the four-wheel drive lifting off with all four wheels at the same time." Yes, I looked to the right of me, and I noticed there was a large water tank, and it was dancing on its rim like this, and I thought, wow, that tank must be empty. So when the earthquake was finished, I went over and I knocked. It was full of water, at least 10,000 liters, at least 10 tons in weight. It is amazing how much power is in those earthquakes. But are earthquakes part of our way of life? Why should we look on earthquakes as an ominous sign for planet Earth? Are they increasing, or do we just hear more about them? Friends, we have some statistics that will give you an insight into earthquakes. Let's have a look at these statistics. We are not looking at all the earthquakes, but only at what scientists call big shakers. Anything that is larger than 7 on the Richter scale, we are looking at. In the 9th century, we are going back 1,000 years. In the 9th century, there was one major earthquake. In the 16th century, there was the next major earthquake. In the 18th century, there were 2 major earthquakes, and in the 19th century, 1 major earthquake. That means in 1,000 years, from 900 to 1900, there were 5 major earthquakes. Now we go from 1900 to 1975. There were 9 major earthquakes in only 75 years compared with 1,000 years before. From 1975 to 1978, there were 10 major earthquakes in only 3 years. When we look at earthquakes today, and you can go to the internet and type in major earthquakes, it will tell you that there are 6,000 major earthquakes every year happening today. They seem to be approaching a climax. They are telling us time is running out. The signs which Jesus mentions are telling us that we live in the time of the end. Friend, what happens when you come to the last moment of the time of the end? We fall off the perch. You know, we might be probably like on a conveyor belt, and we can see in the distance people dropping off. But the time comes when there's no one ahead of us, and we are the next ones. And that is what is happening with our civilization today. We are on the brink of the end of the world. But Jesus is not the only one that talks about the signs of the end. Let us look at what James says, and that is very interesting. He says, "Your gold and silver are corroded. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you." Is this rushing after money a phenomenon of the last days? Or has it always been like that? Friends, I want to give you some sobering comparisons. As you know, I lived during my childhood years in East Germany. In the 50s and 60s, yes, some of you can go back that far. In the 50s and 60s, if somebody had 20,000 East German marks, which didn't count for much, but if they had 20,000 of them in the bank, they were regarded as rich people. If they had 100,000 marks in the bank, they were seen as very rich, and questions were being asked as to where the money came from. In the 70s and 80s, I lived here on the beautiful British Isles. I realized then that if people had between 20,000 and 100,000 pounds in the bank, they were regarded as rich people. I think in 1975 or 1976, we bought our first house in Bletchley, and it cost the total amount of 13,000 pounds. Yeah? That tells you, of course, if you had 100,000 pounds, you could live off the rent that you can charge. You can just buy houses. But that tells you how things were at that time. During my time here in Britain, I would hear of some millionaires, but I can tell you they were few and far between. But what has happened in the last 30 to 40 years? Today, we have millionaires in China. You have millionaires in Russia. There are even millions of millionaires in a poor country like India. People have become speculators in their thousands. It seems everybody wants to have a fortune, but they have not become happier for all the money they have. Hoarding wealth is a sign of the last days. When I think back to my grandparents and before, I realize the aim of the grandparents and of their parents was to give their children an education so that they don't starve, that they can earn the money they need to eat. But you speak to young people today, and I don't have a problem with young people. The wise man Solomon says, "Rejoice, O young men, in your youth." Enjoy it while you can. But when I talk to young people and I say, "What do you want to be?" it is usually a choice between three occupations: doctor, lawyer, or vet. They want to become a carpenter, a bricklayer, a roofer, whatever else our parents were doing. Young people today are aiming for the highest paid jobs. Why? Because they have seen their parents struggle, and they say to themselves, "We don't want to struggle like our parents. We want to earn big money." I have 3 children, and each one of them, God bless them, has a professional career. And they make their dad's wages, or what dad used to earn, look like pocket money. That's the world we live in today. But it is not that we are content with what we have. We are looking for ways to increase our nest egg and increase it so that if we reach retirement, we can be like the rich farmer. And we can say, "We have plenty. We can go on once-in-a-lifetime holidays. We can do what we like. We have got money enough until we die." But friends, to Christians, I say, but the cause of the Lord is languishing. It is not having enough money. When I look around the institutions that we have, whether we call them sanitariums, health centers, printing presses, you name it, they all came through sacrifice. And today, many of our people don't even want to send their children to our schools because it means a sacrifice of money. They would rather see them educated for free. And with that kind of education comes a lot of theories that can make your children unstuck. Don't gamble. It is not worth it, friends. But hoarding wealth is a sign that we have arrived at the very end of time. James continues when he says, "The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence." That statement would not have been true for any generation except the generation at the end, the generation that we live in. Often, our building up our assets is done through exploitation. God says, "The cries of the poor have come to my ears." Today, we don't think so much of millionaires in our society. Today, the rich of the world count their money in the billions. Isn't that a very clear sign that we are in the last days? Jesus and James are not alone in describing conditions of the last days. The Apostle Paul, he writes to Timothy about the conditions of the last days. Now, you need to read that in your own time, because Paul mentions 19 sins that are prevalent, that are abounding in the society of the last days. And when you read through the list, you will find they are all sins you read about in the papers and you hear about on TV. But I have something more shocking for you. Paul was not talking about the world. He was talking about the church. I know that because he summarized his prophecy about the last days with these words: people will be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And friends, the world out there is not trying to be lovers of God. They live for pleasure. But Paul says, I am sad to say, that mindset has come into the Christian church. You know for yourself, if somebody was to say, tomorrow afternoon we have a barbecue and we invite all of you to come, how many would say, I have to see first whether I want to go? We would probably all be there. And if he said, tomorrow we have a Bible study, everyone is welcome, would we be of the same mindset? Would we think we need to be there? Or would we think, oh, it's Bible study. I thought it was food. We find plenty of evidence that, brothers and sisters, we are living in the last days. Jesus mentions another sign of the end, and he says, for false Christs and false prophets shall arise. Our world has seen an explosion in the interest of the occult. When I lived here in the 70s, I remember if there was something fishy on TV, like something that had a little connotation of spirit beings, people would switch it off. They would say, we are not watching this rubbish. But today, even in soapies, in those everyday carry-on programs on TV, suddenly somebody who has died will appear somewhere and give some nice, pleasing thoughts to somebody else. We are being set up for expecting the supernatural. The devil is softening our stand so that when he comes and pretends he is the Christ, that we won't run away from him. The time of the end will be characterized by an alarming increase of counterfeit manifestations of the supernatural. What advice does Jesus give to us? He says, therefore, if they say to you, look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. It really pays to know what the Bible teaches about the signs of Jesus coming. False prophets are everywhere telling you what is not in the Bible. Friends, if they told you what was in the Bible, we wouldn't call them false prophets. But they will twist and bend things so that you will listen to them and be carried away with false teachings. Why should we pay no attention to these false prophets? Jesus says, for his coming will not be in the desert or in the secret chamber. He says, for as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Friends, when I was a child and we had a thunderstorm, I noticed that if I crawled under the table, I would still notice when the lightning happens. I can't hide from it. In Australia, we have many displays of heaven's miracles. We have lightning storms where every few seconds you will see the whole sky light up from all the lightning that comes down. And you can't sleep through this time. You will know when it happens, and that is what Jesus says. You don't need to wait for the announcement on the news. Jesus arrived in Jerusalem or in London. You can go and see him. No, friends. This will not be Jesus. When he comes, everyone will know it. These manifestations are signs that we live in the last days. It means very soon Jesus will come. The prophet Daniel also saw in vision things that would characterize the last days. The angel said to Daniel, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase." Friends, we are living right in the middle of this increase in knowledge. That means time is running out. Don't get carried away with gadgets. We can spend small fortunes on them, and yes, they are getting cheaper, but we don't need to have every one of them. It's not necessary. We can get sidetracked. We can think this life is all about having the latest little gadgets. Friends, but besides the running to and fro, do we also see besides the increase in knowledge, do we also see a running to and fro? Friends, if I asked you to raise your hand if you were born in a different country, probably most hands would go up. The same is true in Australia. We use airplanes, tilt trains, and cars in order to run to and fro. In the past, people used to travel on horseback or on carts. How many of you still use that mode of transport? I didn't see any horses outside. So we have come with the more modern methods. But friends, we are running today. We are no longer walking. We can't spare the time. We have gone from sending letters, you remember them? They came in the letterbox. Yes? Today we make phone calls, we send faxes, and even they are a little bit long. It takes at least a minute to get a fax through to the other side of the world. So today we send emails. And probably there's something else already developed that I'm not aware of. You know, when we communicated Pastor Sweeney or Brother Charles, I can wait on my computer. I send it, and within a minute, I can have a reply. You know, we are in a mad rush today. Our world, simply speaking, has moved into the fast lane. We are all wanting to overtake those that are going slow. But the increase in knowledge also refers, or originally refers, to our understanding of the book of Daniel. It didn't have to do with technology, but technology is also included. Today, we know who is coming, whether we are ready or not. It is sad to notice that today, people get more excited about advances in technology than understanding of prophecy. one day soon, Jesus will come. The sad point is, he will come whether we are ready or not. The signs of famines, disasters, of earthquakes, wars, the accumulation of wealth, the exploitation of workers, the spread of the occult, the increase in knowledge, these are all wake-up calls for the inhabitants of planet Earth. Jesus also said, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come." Jesus said, the gospel must go to all the world. Friends, that is why we are here. That is why you are here. We as Seventh-day Adventists, we know and believe that when the gospel preaching is completed, Jesus will come. I don't know about you, but I am getting tired of living in this sinful world. Therefore, we make an exerted effort to take the gospel to the world. We as Seventh-day Adventists, we preach it in our churches, in evangelistic campaigns where hundreds and thousands of people attend. In this picture that is from Papua New Guinea, and I believe there were something like 12,000 people that came. They slept on the ground for the whole duration because they did not want to miss one program. Friends, we also share it on the internet, by radio, by satellite and TV. We preach, we teach, and we baptize, so that thousands more can hear the good news and make Jesus Lord of their lives. Luke says about the early church that those who gladly received his word were baptized. And that day, about 3,000 souls were added to them. That is happening again today. Do you know that each day more than 3,000 people make the decision for Jesus and get baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Friends, more than 3,000 people makes more than 1 million a year. Praise the Lord, the work is moving forward. Many people see it as a great privilege to be part of God's remnant church. After all, Jesus commanded us to do so. We should never make an excuse for making an appeal, brethren. That is why we are here. We are not here to be lulled asleep by smooth sayings. We are here to be ignited so that we are on fire for the Lord. These signs, they tell us that Jesus is coming soon. But there are also more recent signs, and from time to time when they come thick and fast, we take notice, and then we have a couple of years of ease, and we have forgotten about them. Think back of December 2004. There was a catastrophe in December that shocked the whole world into action. It was unprecedented in living memory. The tsunamis that hit Thailand, Indonesia, Sri Lanka, and India, and some countries in between, came with such force that it shocked the whole world into action. You had pledges being made by hundreds of millions of pounds to help rebuild those countries. In the space of just a few hours, more than 350,000 people perished. Since then, we have seen extremes of weather patterns all around the world. There are extremes of cold weather in a normally cold country like Mongolia. There are extremes of snowstorms in the US. There are extremes of tsunamis in Japan. There are extremes of drought in Australia. There are extremes of heat waves in Europe. In short, our planet cannot last much longer. The end is near. Christ is coming for you. Everyone who is alive today has to make a choice. What will you do with all the signs of Jesus coming? You can ignore them for a while. You can say, well, Lord, I am preparing for a brilliant career. Or I've only got a few years to go until I get my superannuation. We can make excuses, we can put it off, but the end will catch up with us. Or we can accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior because He loves us so much that He gave us the signs to warn us so that the end will not take us unprepared. Friends, when He comes, He will rescue you and me amidst the destruction of our world. Jesus is waiting with outstretched arms. Are you ready for Jesus to come?